Well, Gamecock Nation, it is finally September. On the last day of August, the Gamecock football team started 1-0 on a neutral site field in Atlanta. Alex and I were both on hand for it. We're going to be giving you our takes on the game, things we saw, a little statistical nuggets that we found interesting. And yeah, there's a lot of teams in the top 25, Alex, that didn't start the season 1-0. Namely some teams that are on the Gamecocks schedule in one way, shape, or form. So we're going to talk all about it. The Gamecocks did win the game 24-11, in case you missed it. The Gamecocks did cover the spread. The spread was 7 at kickoff, so it really started dropping as kickoff approached, and the over-under total was 51.5. So it was a cover cash for the Gamecocks and an under cash if you bet the under. So Alex, we're both there. Let's talk about the environment, the pregame. I'll let you start.
Yeah, and being that the press box in this stadium is a little bit different than Williams-Brice. And Williams-Brice, you're kind of up high, and then you have that glass, so it's not, you can't hear the environment. But in the Falcons Stadium, it's a little bit different. It was open air and kind of felt like I was right in the middle of it. And it was a great turnout, really, by both sides. But really, the South Carolina turnout was really good. Like, what percentage would you put it? Kind of 65-35, maybe more 70-30.
Yeah, that's what kind of the guys I went to the game with and I were discussing. I'd say 65-35 at minimum. Yeah. But I will say that, look, there were big moments for Virginia Tech where their fans got loud. But when the Gamecocks did something good on the field, it seemed like it was 90-10 Gamecocks.
And that place got loud too. Like, I guess being in a dome, it got loud, and for both sides in moments.
Yeah, it did. I hope it came through on TV for those of you that were not in attendance. I guess, Alex, the stadium was cool. I mean, we were trying to figure out how they would do the retractive roof the entire time. We just kept looking up at it. But I will say the introductions were fun. There was 2001: A Space Odyssey for the Gamecocks. And then they did Enter Sandman for Virginia Tech by Metallica, which was just awesome. I mean,
I've never been to Blacksburg or Lane Stadium like that. After kind of hearing that even in a neutral site is something that I want to. It's on the bucket list for something I want to see, because I just imagine it's really cool.
And I think it was fun because for the large part, the South Carolina fans sang along with the introduction of Virginia Tech. Yeah. I don't know if that was the Gamecocks taking their opponent lightly. And when I say the Gamecocks, I mean the fans. But I thought that was interesting because for the first couple of seconds, you were just sitting there like watching it. And then you couldn't help but start yelling it. It was really cool. Frank Beamer did the opening prayer. I thought that was pretty cool. For those of you that missed it, I don't know what they showed on TV. Haven't watched the replay yet. But he was wearing a Gamecock pullover with the Virginia Tech pin. And so that was good. I thought that the arena was fitting for a college football game. You couldn't really see the upper deck, Alex, but the upper deck, I'd say, was probably 40% full, maybe 50% full. So big time event in Atlanta. Overall game thoughts before we get into it, and we're going to dig much deeper into it, but just in case you hadn't looked at the box score, the Gamecocks managed 334 yards of total offense, and Virginia Tech actually outgained them by 2 yards, 336. The Gamecock offense had 209 yards passing, 124 yards rushing. So pretty balanced day, I felt. Defense gave up 221 yards passing and 115 rushing yards. But the big key here is that the Gamecocks did force 2 interceptions. But the offense for the Gamecocks didn't turn the ball over at all. Gamecocks were 4 for 12 on third down, Alex. I'm sure that's something we're going to talk about here a little bit later. And the Hokies were 8 for 18. Gamecocks defense got 4 tackles for loss and 2 sacks. But the Hokies got after Sellers. Just in my opinion, being able to watch the game, I was 29 rows up. So it felt like I was on top of it. They were constantly getting after Sellers to the tune of 4 sacks and 7 tackles for loss. The Gamecocks will have to clean that up. Gamecocks did score a touchdown on special teams on a punt return by Vakari Swain. Got everybody going and kind of let the Gamecock fans, I think, take a breath for the first time in a while.
First game, and I'm already halfway to my bold prediction that I had of 2 special teams touchdowns. So off to a pretty good start there.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I did want to say this. The Gamecocks only had 4 of their 10 drives that went 3 and out. So that was something that, for as much as the offense struggled at different points in the game, being 4 for 10 with one of those being the ball when you get your own 1 yard line after interception, and you end up taking a safety. So 4 of 9 drives, they didn't go 3 and out. So Alex, we're going to get into everything. We're going to talk about the offense, the defense. We got a good show here tonight. So Alex, let's go ahead and roll the new Rooster Rant intro.
The barnyard's fired up or down in the dumps. Rooster's high, Rooster's low. It's college football, don't you know? Either way, let's go. Let's talk about it. Let's scream and shout it. Let's fire everybody fast. So celebrate, it's Rooster Rant. Now here's a late night Gamecock. Matt Anderson and the pride of Hampton County, Alex Jones, and all of you on Rooster Rant.
Oh, that was a lot of fun there. That was me and Alex's first time seeing it. So JC Sherbert never disappoints. So, hey, Jeff, I see you here in the chat box. We'll talk about it a little bit later. Alex and I have some thoughts there about where the Gamecocks might be in the media poll. But, starting off on the offense, I think you have to start with Lenore Sellers. Alex, Lenore Sellers is the most important part of the Gamecocks offense. There's not many players like him in the country, if any. Maybe some can match production-wise, but things that he can do are unbelievable. So, let's start with the good, the bad, and the ugly for Lenore Sellers yesterday in Atlanta.
Yeah, I mean, the good, you can watch that first series and he was in full control, kind of, but they really had some open plays on that one too, with the tight ends getting into the flats with Brady Honda and Maurice Brown in that first play. But then, he capitalized on that gun, or then he had that throw to the slant to Nick Harbor, which really kind of set the tone. And I know we'll talk about Nick Harbor in a minute, but I think that really kind of got his confidence going from the start there. But I mean, he was in full control there early on. And I think, in the second quarter, a little bit, it looked like he was maybe trying to do too much there, kind of sit in the pocket. And then on that safety, the safety, and then there are a few times where he just got to get the ball out quicker. Because as you mentioned, kind of off the top, Virginia Tech started to kind of get after him a little bit, just kind of get the ball out quicker. And I think maybe that was a little bit of just trying to do too much. But I thought second half, the offense as a whole and really Sellers to kind of settled down and started to get things moving there. And then obviously that punt return for a touchdown kind of really sparked things. But I mean, he made, for all the kind of national talk that's out there about, him needing to take a next step from, a pass game standpoint, he made some really good throws in that game. I mean, the Harbor touchdown, the one that stood, the one that the deep ball Harbor, that ball was placed perfectly. And then on that one that was overturned by, and we'll get into that ruling in a minute because that was a crazy ruling, I thought. But that throw to Nick Harbor in the corner of the end zone, that was a perfect throw. That was about only where Nick Harbor could get it. And, so I thought, from a pass game standpoint, you saw what he could do. And I thought you even saw progression there a little bit. But overall, I think it was a good game for Lenore Sellers. And then just some of those runs, you saw those Lenore Sellers doing Lenore Sellers types of runs. I mean, you saw it early on, but then late in the game on that last drive, they're trying to really kind of ice it away and not give the ball back to Virginia Tech. He's breaking tackles, and then the way he can just kind of body control, his body control down the sideline where he got tiptoe and get 4 extra yards. It's pretty incredible. So I think he kind of just picked up right where he left off.
I agree. I felt like the game plan felt very similar to the Kentucky game last year on the road. It seemed like start out a lot of easy throws for Sellers, which I liked personally. Yeah. It didn't take much to score the first touchdown of the game. A couple kind of screens or outs to the tight ends, and Lenore Sellers rumbling into the end zone and just absolutely trucking a guy on his way there. That was right in front of me, and that kind of shows his strength. I don't know. You only throw 19 pass attempts. You're 12 of 19. You go for 209 yards, whatever it was, a touchdown. You had 1 touchdown called back. You had at least 2 drops early in the game that I remember that were bad drops that that really hindered maybe that second or third drive after the success they had on the opening drive.
Yeah, there were a few throws too, like that one to Mayfield Bennett over the middle that was high. There's another one too that it was just a straight miss on it. Like, so there were a few of those, but I think that a little bit of that was kind of in that second quarter, kind of early third quarter, where I think they were just still trying to figure out, the system with Sam Cephas over there, and they were trying to figure out everything over there. And then you had, them Virginia Tech really kind of not letting South kind of get their run game going. And I kind of feel that was part of Virginia Tech's game plan. It was like, we're just going to let Lenore Sellers beat us with his arm, and we're going to try to stop the run. And I think there was just a little bit of adjustment to that early on.
Yeah, and when you talk Lenore Sellers, then you talk the running game, the next logical place takes you to the offensive line. And we'll come back to the running game a little bit later. But the offensive line, I don't know if it's first game jitters. I know that this unit has played better than they showed, at least in the preseason. According to so many people I talked to that know offensive line, this unit has performed better. I thought it was interesting. We talked about, some insight that JC got a little while ago that, was confirmed with everyone I talked to about Shed Surratt Jr. And there was a little bit of a whisper that came out a couple of nights before the game. And I think that kind of news started to trickle out a little bit until, I don't know, Alex, maybe an hour before game time, pretty much everybody knew that Surratt was not going to be in the game. Yeah. I think the big logical question that everyone's asking is, if Big Tree did not beat out Case and Henry, then why wasn't Big Tree at right guard instead of who was it? Blanking on the transfer, Rodney Newsome.
Yeah, Rodney Newsome. It was left guard.
Yeah, and so with Rodney Newsome at left guard, I don't think anyone was thinking that would be the case. They thought it would be Big Tree. They might have thought it would be Nick Sharp.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like, if going into it, I was like, okay, well, if Shed Surratt isn't going to be at that left guard spot, I was thinking it was going to be Nick Sharp, and then so obviously they started Rodney Newsome, and then even went to Marquis Anderson in the second half. So that did surprise me a little bit, to be honest.
Yeah, it's one of the questions that I think a lot of Gamecock fans are going to be asking, especially folks that pay attention to the Big Spur, because that was not what we were expecting, and it wasn't good. Let's be honest. Lenore Sellers probably still escaped a couple sacks, and they sacked him 4 times, 7 tackles for loss. What do you think caused the offensive line not to get a push? You might have had a better view than me. Was it Virginia Tech just that varied at the beginning of the game? What was it? I
think from a run game standpoint, it kind of felt like Virginia Tech was really just selling out to stop the run. And obviously, from an offensive line standpoint, they've got to continue to just improve there. And I'm interested to see just from a game 1 to game 2 standpoint how that looks. And then really, I obviously with South Carolina State next week, and then I think you'll learn a little bit more about that when Vanderbilt comes in. But then I think, when you look at it too, and I think and then from a pass game standpoint, there were just a few times where I think I remember one where Rodney Newsome got beat. So I'm just really, it was a game 1 jitters thing, and I think that's something we're going to learn. And you want to see big progression in that when you get to South Carolina State. But these next few weeks are really going to be key and kind of big for the offensive line.
Yeah, and we talked about the defensive line a little bit for Virginia Tech. They definitely have some guys there, right?
Yeah,
first and foremost.
Yeah, their defensive line was a little bit better too than I thought it'd be. Like Kamari Copeland, I know we talked to Colby about it last week on the preview show, but Kamari Copeland was pretty good too. But at the same time too, South Carolina's going to see a lot of really good defensive lines this year as well.
Yeah, and you're going to have an opportunity. You have a week to get ready for South Carolina State. Just between me and you, Alex, that this is a week just to get better. This is a week to get better on themselves. It's a week to figure out position groups, because you would love to see if there was an injury to Shed, if he can come back quickly. If there was an injury to Nick Sharp, will he come back quickly? Big Tree, what was that entire situation? Because outside of Shed, you can't save a red shirt. So there must have been something that went on or transpired over the previous week. That's just me putting on my investigative hat. No one's told me that. I'm still trying to figure it out myself. But talking about the running game, I was surprised to see Oscar Attaway get as many snaps as he did compared to Rasul Faison. I think it was 34-20 or 32-20. But I really think that Attaway ran well. He ran hard. Yeah. He had some shiftiness I don't think many Gamecock fans had seen out of him prior. But I think it became a situation where the game was very tight. Gamecocks never trailed, but the game got tight, and maybe it was just they trusted someone they've seen do it for a year over someone who just gained eligibility a week ago.
Yeah, I really liked what we saw from Oscar Attaway. There were some times where there maybe weren't big lanes to run through, but he found ways to get through it and be pretty productive kind of overall in the game. And then Russell Faison, it's kind of crazy that he had a 30-yard run that didn't even go for a first down. But I thought you saw some flashes from him too, and so I'm interested to see from I think this kind of ties in with the offensive line too, just how they continue to progress and improve in the run game, because I think you did see some flashes there. Like you could tell Virginia Tech really early on with those kind of tight ends going into the flat, like they were really having to respect Lenore Sellers and his run game. And I think that really opened some stuff up for the running backs and those tight ends kind of out in the flats too with some of those plays they did. So I think there's a lot you can kind of build on from a run game standpoint. Now it's just kind of taking those next steps, and I think getting to South Carolina State, that could be something that they can really work on in this game on Saturday.
Yeah, the big question, we'll talk about all this on Wednesday when we talk more about South Carolina State, is it'll be interesting to see how the running back carries are divvied up, because I think that Rooster Faison is probably the better all-around back. I mean, based on everything I've heard and what I saw on Sunday, very limited, right?
Yeah.
But Oscar Attaway is very steady, and if he's done something to his running game to be able to do back-to-back spin moves and still try and gain some more yards, that's pretty crazy. Moving on to tight ends and wide receivers, really can't say much outside of Nick Harbor, Brady Hunt. It's really those two guys that had the bulk of the yardage for Lenore Sellers. But you did see Donovan Murphy get in there and make a big 21-yard conversion for a first down. Mazio, look, Mazio is such a good team player. I don't think anyone's upset. I mean, obviously they wanted to get the ball in his hands too. Sometimes things are taken away. I don't know. Thoughts on overall play calling, I guess, Alex?
Yeah, play calling, first starting kind of with your receiver point. Like I was, Drake Jacobs played a lot too, and I thought there were some times he had a chance to. But we talked about Mazio Bennett and had that one where he was open that Lenore Sellers just missed him a little bit. But kind of sticking to that wide receiver point before getting the play call, Harbor, that was it was good to see, because you kind of hear about all the work he's put in since putting track aside. And, just to see him go out there and make some of those plays. And it wasn't just, the deep ball stuff where that should have been probably touchdown in the core of the end zone. There were a couple of times where he had really nice kind of quick out routes or quick, comeback routes where he, Lenore Sellers connected with him for a 15-yard first down on a third down or something like that. There's a lot that you can just really see the improvement. And now that's something when you think about for the future, teams are now, going to have to legit respect, what he can do from a deep pass game standpoint, which should help open up things for Donovan Murphy, who I thought had flashed yesterday. Only got targeted twice, but on that one catch had about 10 yards after the catch, and I thought he looked pretty good as well. And then just from a play calling standpoint, I think it was fine. I thought early on, I thought that first drive that was perfect. They had Virginia Tech on their toes. They were running some tempo. And that's something I am interested to see moving forward, how much tempo they kind of bring into this offense. You saw a little bit of it yesterday. I think it did work and kind of kept Virginia Tech on their toes a little bit. So that's something that I'm kind of keeping an eye on moving forward there.
You're just talking about Shula's play calling, because I think he nailed everything on the individual players. Just my viewpoint watching it, whenever it seemed like Lenore Sellers had time, things were open. Now, whether he made the right read, but when it was all of a sudden I'm watching Lenore's, try and escape or scramble or running back and not have anywhere to go, it's hard for me to know how good the play calling was unless you're going to say, hey, we're just going to pass the ball all day. We're not even going to try and establish the running game. So we'll see. I do think that everyone says it. You get, the better from first game to second game more than any other time throughout the course of the year. And we've talked about Alex. I mean, there's a really good chance of being 5-0 going to LSU. And I didn't see anything on offense today outside of the offensive line. And look, I've said it a million times. I've said it on this show. I've said it on the message boards. Until I see the offensive line perform, I'm not going to believe it. But so many good things are being said about them behind closed doors by people I trust that I have to believe in it. Just be honest with you guys. So moving on, I think South Carolina State Gamecocks should be in a good position. Then you have Vanderbilt, and the offensive line is going to have to be better than it was against Virginia Tech. But Alex, moving on to defense, I think that this was a virtual masterclass from Clayton White. I didn't think that Virginia Tech could score more than 17 points. And outside of a safety that was kind of gifted to them, they wouldn't have even broke double digits.
Yeah, like I thought the game plan was kind of awesome from a defensive standpoint, and that was something that we talked about going into it. Really, for offense and defense, with the two new coordinators, you're going to have to piece together things from the past to be ready. And I thought they affected Jones pretty much all night, and it wasn't Dylan Stewart was constantly affecting Kyron Jones, and even with that being double teamed. But the few times that you saw him be one-on-one with the tackle, it did not end up being good for the offense. Like that, his sack, he was one-on-one with the tackle. There's another instance too where he was pressure in there, but it felt like Jones a lot of times was having to either get the ball out quick or move out in the pocket. And for all the talk about the defensive tackles and what they have to replace, I thought Moncal Goodwin had a really good game. He flashed a lot. Nick Barrett flashed a lot too, and I thought Gabriel Brown-Lodindi had some moments in there too. So I thought from a defensive line standpoint as a whole, I thought it was really good. Like Dylan Stewart was awesome in that game and had pressure all night on Jones. And I think that pressure really kind of it really helped the secondary as well. And there are a lot of 50-50 balls, and Shane Beamer kind of talked about that last night post-game that they want to make a few more plays on. But there are also a few of those 50-50 balls that are probably a little bit more just Virginia Tech wide receivers making really good plays, and Kyron Jones just put it in the right spot. Where there are a few plays that, the corners or safeties could have made maybe a little bit better play on it, sure. Like, you're going to have those in first games, but you do have to give some credit because I think Donovan Green and Aiden Green will have a really big season at Virginia Tech. Like we talked about Donovan Green specifically. Like, when he was healthy at Wake Forest, he was one of the best receivers in the ACC, and you kind of saw that from him on Sunday. But I thought the secondary overall was good to see. Shined, and the Judge Collier injury like that. We'll see kind of what the severity of that one is. Like him being in a leg brace on crutches during that game, so we'll see. But then you saw Vakari Swain come in. You really started, we talked about all offseason the depth at cornerback, and you really saw it. Even seeing DeMarcus Leach get in there, that was for a true freshman. That's going to be valuable res for him. But I thought Miles Norwood, Vakari Swain and Brandon Cisse had really good nights, and then DQ Smith and Peyton Williams, I thought, kind of really just you didn't really notice DQ Smith and Peyton Williams only obviously on the interception he did, but you didn't notice them just because I think they were playing so well, and that's a spot that you kind of see that happen a lot.
Yeah, when it comes to defensive backs, I'm still not very worried. I think that when they were in those man coverage situations where it was a 50-50 ball and the Virginia Tech guy just made a crazy good play, happened at least 3 times, maybe 4 times I can remember. Those are 50-50 balls the wide receiver could even possibly catch, not just a true 50-50 ball. It's probably a 25% chance to make that catch. And sometimes you just tip your hat and say, thank you for dropping the easy ones across the middle of the field a few times because those were drive killers. But South Carolina did find a way to bend, not break. And I think Fred Johnson was a big part of that, and the linebackers, Alex.
Yeah, I don't know how I forgot to talk about the linebackers just now. Like those guys, you saw the speed kind of fully on with those guys from all 3 of those guys. And, Fred Johnson was awesome, obviously, with his, game high 10 tackles, his interception. Like, probably the only mistake he made was bringing that interception out of the end zone in that one. But that's something that's a, teachable thing that, he'll learn from. But he was awesome. Like, he was getting east to west constantly and making big hits and then also playing the run up the middle. But, I thought, you really – one player – obviously Fred Johnson shined, but I really liked what I saw from Justin Okoronkwo too. Like there were some times he had that hit, obviously on that kind of stretch run where he got out there and beat the wide receiver out there and got to the running back. But I thought he really shined. And you saw Sean Murphy in there, and that was really the 3 linebackers rotating in there, and that's really what you saw last year for the most part too with Debo, Ben, Martin Scott, and Demetrius Knight. Like that's kind of the 3 they rotate with Fred Johnson in there a little bit too, but. I don't think I think you come away from that game feeling really good about what they can do from a linebacker standpoint because the speed was just kind of full on. You could really see it in that game.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not worried about linebackers at all. I'm really not worried about the secondary at all. I'm not worried about defense at all. Just straight up not, because anytime you have a dual threat kind of guy like Kyron Drones, he's going to be hard to tackle. He's going to make throws on the run. Some of those were throws on the run when he just threw a perfect dime. So just take your hat off to him and be thankful you won the game. Virginia Tech, I did watch the Brent Pryce news conference after the game. He was very complimentary to South Carolina. Kind of said that, look, to beat a team as good as South Carolina, who's certainly going to be in the top half of their league, one of the best teams in the SEC, and some of that might be coach speak on his end, but the Gamecocks are ranked that way. And for him to say, like, we can't make these mental mistakes. It's the same thing that Shane Beamer was saying years ago when the Gamecocks were losing games like this. Like, thinking back to North Carolina, just like, we can't make that mistake. And it's the truth. I do want to give a quick shout out. I don't know if anybody here knows this human being. I want to give this guy a gold star, because if you were at the game, you saw number 70, Jake Recker, freshman walk-on, or redshirt freshman offensive lineman, I believe. He was constantly with the towel, waving it around, getting the crowd going for the Gamecocks, and that it's just good to see, because that's the whole chemistry of a team when you're supporting the guys that are on the field and being the pep up guy. So it just shows some of the team camaraderie there. Alex, I don't think we have to say much more about defense. You want to move on to special teams?
Yeah, so that was one of the biggest topics going into the game. Just who was going to play what spot, and kind of pregame warmups, you started to get a pretty good sense of what that starting spot is going to look like. And I thought for the most part, like William Joyce didn't really get tested too much from a place kicking standpoint, but did his job on that field goal after that Nick Harbert touchdown was called back. Did that. Mason Love was the holder, and Cole Rasmussen was the long snapper. But then I thought Mason Love at punter had a really good game. I'm looking up the numbers right now for what he averaged.
47 yards a punt.
Yeah, so that was really good, and he had a couple punts where, especially that one where he got to kind of roll down deep into the Virginia Tech territory. So I thought you felt really good, or you feel really good about what you saw from a special teams standpoint, and they'll be tested obviously a little bit more from that standpoint. But then obviously the big play, special teams play, is going to be the Vakari Swain touchdown return. That and then just for them to kind of seem like they were going to take the 5 yards, and then they end up re-kicking it, and that was just a great individual effort by Vakari Swain, because breaking those multiple tackles. But then there are also so many, smart plays by the, blocking by the blockers, just because it's so easy to get, blocking the backs or stuff like that on those types of plays. And it was just executed all around really well in that game. And that was really kind of the spark. And you kind of felt at that moment too, when that touchdown return happened, you kind of felt really good about South Carolina's chances. I think that really just took all the momentum that Virginia Tech had really just completely flipped to the South Carolina side, and kind of just felt over from there.
Well, I agree with you, Alex. And it was almost, I don't know if you could feel it up in the media press area, but in the stands, at least for me, when Vakari returned that punt for a touchdown, 80 yards, it seemed like everybody could breathe, including the players, the coaching staff. Yeah. And then when the defense came back out, it was like this team has already done that. The offense was just on the field. It was like a 50-yard drive. Now we're going to pin our ears back. And boy, did they. I felt like the defense really got let loose there after that punt return for a touchdown.
That's a good point about just kind of the relaxing part of when that happened, because I think you get into that point of the game where it's a really tight game. You have a really small lead. You kind of wonder if the pressure was really going to start mounting on South Carolina, just because they're the ranked team. They're the number 13 team in the country going up against an unranked team. Was the pressure really going to start mounting them, and how is that going to affect the offense or the defense? But to your point, I think it's a really good point that you kind of just felt a sense of almost not relief, but like you said, kind of just take a breath at that moment, because you extended the lead. And as you mentioned, I think the defense really started to get after drones at that point. And then you saw even a little bit more confidence offensively with the willingness to take the deep shot to Nick Harbor. And I think it just really, that was the game changing play just for all three phases, to be honest.
Yeah. And look, when you play a team like Virginia Tech, you're not holding any plays back. So I've seen some people posting like, hey, maybe the offense was vanilla for first game of the year. Nah, they got a lot to work on. The offensive line especially has a lot to work on. I did want to get two quick things from you, Alex, when it comes to punting the ball. To me, and maybe it was just the angle where I was sitting, it seemed like Mason Love's punts had a little bit of a little feng shui on them. It seemed like a different rotation. Was that something you noticed as well?
A little bit, like it almost like it'd be a punt that'd be hard to catch, almost. I mean, maybe even hard to track. Like almost like I'm trying to, not a slice, but almost like a curve on a golf swing. Like I think it looked like, because where we were sitting in the press box, like we were in the corner of the end zone. So
we were right diagonal from each other, so we both had different angles.
Right, yeah, and it kind of looked like there were a few punts. Like I think it may have been his second punt. He punted, and I thought it was like a shank, to be honest, with the way it came off his foot.
And it just hugged the sideline, almost like it was a golfer hugging the green before you get that roll.
Yeah, all of a sudden it just turns, and I think it's a little bit different what they saw with Kroger, which those are hard to compare just because Kroger is left-footed. But I think it looks like it could be one that'd be hard to catch. And you did see that sometimes where Virginia Tech probably could have come up and caught it or fair catched it, but they let the ball roll, and that's the one that kind of landed, I think, either inside the 10 or inside the 15. So I think you really liked what you saw from Mason Love in that game, and I forgot to mention Max Kelly too, a true freshman, was handling kickoffs too. So that's obviously there's a lot of trust that they have with him, being that he was a summer enrollee too, and I thought he did his job there. But yeah, that's a really interesting point too on Mason Love and the punt, because I meant to write that one down because I noticed it on that, especially on that second or third punt, whichever one it was, where it's just a weird kind of spin that comes off the ball.
Yeah, and I didn't know if that was by design. That'd be a question I'd love to ask Shane, if Mason can put a little spin depending on where they are in field position, because that's what it looked like. But anyway, Shane did have something really interesting. He said in his press conference, he said that as long as he's been doing special teams, as many coaches he's been around, anytime there's a penalty on the punting team, you always make them repunt because something happens. And Brent Pree said the same thing. He said that I've known Shane for a while, and I knew that he was not going to take the penalty. Essentially, I don't want to put words in his mouth. That's the way it sounded. And he said, look, our guys on punt coverage team just ran all the way down the field and had to run all the way back. And he said that takes a little bit of wind out your sails. So just a really, good football point. That's all that is. And then Nick Harbor as a gunner, there was at least one time where he got down there in a hurry and he planted a hit on somebody.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense for him to be a gunner. And you kind of saw that with Xavier Legette. Xavier Legette was a gunner when he was at South Carolina, especially that last year. And he made those same type of plays as well. But with his kind of straight line speed that he has, and he's physical enough where, if they even put two guys on him out there, like he's going to get around those guys. He can get down there in a hurry to make plays, either force the fair catch and not let the returner go any farther, or to make a tackle like he did on that punt. So Shane Beamer has kind of talked about, even in the preseason, he mentioned it last night again, the job he's been doing as a gunner, and it really just makes perfect sense for him to be in that spot.
Yeah, it absolutely does. After this quick break, Alex and I are going to come back and give our MVPs of the game on offense, defense, and special teams. We're going to look at a little bit of the rest of the college football slate that happened on Saturday, anything we were surprised by. And then we're going to figure out if we think the Gamecocks will be ranked in the top 10 tomorrow in the AP media poll or coaches poll when it comes out. So, Alex, let's hit that sponsor break and be right back with more Gamecock football.
Well, if it would cooperate.
we got a new bumper, y'all. Bear with us. We got a new break.
Come on, Carl.
If it's not going to work, we can move on, Alex. But if you can get it, we need to get it in. All right. We'll get the sponsor break next time. Appreciate you dealing with us on that. But Alex, let's go ahead and move into our offensive. Let's move into our offensive MVPs, special teams, defense. Do you have a specific side of the ball you want to start on?
Let's go offense.
Okay.
I'll go Nick Harbor. I'm sorry, that's probably the easy one to take, but I think just with him, like it's that progression that you've seen from him, and he kind of talked about it last night. He was asked about it in the post-game press conference how gratifying that is, and you just have to imagine from a confidence standpoint, like you can put in all the work and see the results on the practice field during preseason camp, but it's one thing to do it in that type of environment with the national spotlight on the game. So he was really good for all the reasons we mentioned earlier, and I think I would go with him. There are a few options to go here with you, but I'd go with Nick Harbor.
Yeah, I thought about Nick. I actually thought about Brady Hunt because there were some big time plays that he made. Ultimately, I'm going with Lenore Sellers. Really set the tone from the first play of the game, had his Houdini skills, and then the deep ball to Nick Harbor was a beautiful pass. So on offense, I will go with Lenore Sellers. On defense, I really think there's only one answer, and that is Dylan Stewart, because he did cause so much havoc. And when you face a less mobile quarterback, I think you're going to see exactly how much havoc he causes, because you're going to see a lot more sacks than you saw last night in Atlanta.
Yeah, with his stat line being the 7 total tackles and 1.5 tackles for loss, like he was even more disruptive than that. Like he was just, like we mentioned earlier, it felt like he was especially just because of the attention that he's going to draw. Like you saw multiple times they had a tight end attached on the line of scrimmage to be with him, or a running back was on the right side of Drones to be with Dylan Stewart. And I thought one of his more impressive plays, obviously he had the sack, but the play where he kind of just decides where they run, but they kind of do those inside draws, and he kind of just dips in and then goes around and meets Justin Okoronkwo in the middle of the line of scrimmage and gets I think it was Marcellus Hawkins. So he was really good. I think Fred Johnson has a real case too, because of what he did. I mean, 10 total tackles, just kind of exactly what you saw from some of those guys like D Knight really last year. Like it's just the speed that he showed and some of the hits. Like you can just tell he's playing with a lot of confidence. He's comfortable in the system. Obviously, they trust him a whole bunch. The east to west speed from really all three of those guys, especially Johnson, was something that was really one of the biggest standouts of the game, honestly.
Yeah, Fred Johnson was a freak. He's on every draft board in the NFL. I ran into Seahawks and Seahawks and Saints.
There were a ton of scouts there yesterday.
Yeah, there were a ton of scouts there. I talked to them, and all these players we're talking about were on their radar, and they actually mentioned J.R. Johnson was someone that they had heard a lot about. And I said, just wait, you'll see. Special teams, I could go two ways. I mean, the easy answer is Vicarious Swain because of what he was able to do on the punt return. But Mason Love, I thought, punted beautifully and really kept the Gamecocks in position to let their defense play bend, don't break. I don't think that the Hokies ever got the ball on the Gamecock side of the 50-yard line, even on the safety punt. I don't think they crossed the 50. So I'm going to go Mason Love, but, Swain, give him all the roses, Alex.
Yeah, I was going to go Mason Love, and you can't go wrong either way with this. And just because with Love, like to your point exactly, and what we talked about earlier, like he was really good in that game. Putting them in deep in their own territory multiple times and be just really consistent on all of his punts. But I'll go with Swain, just because that was such a game changing type of play, such an incredible effort. Breaking tackles, like there were so many different tackles he had to break in. Just the one, we've got to talk about this earlier with him, but to bounce back after having the fumbled punt, like that's something that can really hurt your confidence. But obviously Shane Beamer them trusted him to go back out there for that punt, and he kind of bounced back from that punt and made a huge play in that game.
Yeah, so let's really quick. I mean, I agree with everything you said. I want to go. We'll just recap the SEC scores really quick, just see if anything catches our eye. I watched a number of SEC games, but there were some of them I flipped the channel when it became pretty clear who was going to win. But let's just plop that up real quick for us to look at. And while we do that, Alex, I'm also be thinking about what we think the AP Top 25 is going to look like tomorrow.
Yeah.
But the SEC, Missouri did exactly what we probably thought they were going to do, 61-6 over Central Arkansas. Auburn got it done against Baylor Friday night on the road, 38-24. A lot of grit being shown by Auburn there. Then you have the big one. I'm sure we're going to talk about this, Alex, when we talk about the preseason top 25. But Ohio State held on at home against Texas, 14-7. LSU beat that team in the upstate, 17-10. Georgia won convincingly over Marshall. Another shocker, Alex. Florida State beating Alabama by 2 touchdowns. Going into that game, they were 2 touchdown underdogs. Florida beat Long Island University very handedly, 55-0. Oklahoma beat Illinois State 35-3. A&M won 42-24 over UTSA. So that one's interesting to me. Ole Miss 63-7. I told you, Alex. I told you about Lane Kiffin. Tennessee 45-26 over Syracuse. So some points scored there for the Orangemen. Mississippi State 34-17 over Southern Miss. Is Mississippi State coming back to life? Kentucky, 24-16 versus Toledo. Arkansas 52-7 over Alabama A&M. Vanderbilt 45-3 over poor little Charleston Southern, my brother's former school. And then obviously your Gamecocks won 24-11 over Virginia Tech. Alex, anything kind of crazy stand out to you, except for, or you just want to move into the AP Top 25 and talk about it there?
We'll probably talk about the Alabama-Florida State game real quick. Like I was pretty dialed in on that one, and that completely surprised me. I thought it was going to be the other way around. I thought the score would probably be flipped than what it was in that game. Alabama's defense that's going to be a question mark just because Thomas Castellanos could really do whatever he wanted against Alabama's defense. And I thought they'd be improved just because they got some players, LT Overton, on the inside of that D line. It's Alabama. They got players, but man, you kind of listen around today to what some of the what the Alabama fan base is thinking. There's some heat that's really getting put on Kalen DeBoer right now, and it's going to be interesting to watch, especially because with Alabama coming to South Carolina this year, it's going to be really interesting to see where they are at that point of the season.
Yeah, big props to Castellanos from Florida State. He talked it all summer, talked it all preseason, and boy, oh boy, you know that he is a happy camper. Got to talk quickly about the LSU Clemson game. LSU, as we mentioned, won 17-10. The Clemson Tigers had a 10-3 lead at halftime and were held scoreless in the second half. Really, the thing I'm going to talk about here, Alex, is what we touched on earlier with Nick Harbor. What is a touchdown anymore? I don't know how Nick Harbor and the LSU kids, touchdowns weren't touchdowns. If a running back dives just the ball over the pylon, over the goal line, and the ball gets knocked out of his hand by a defender, it's a touchdown. But you can carry a ball, catch it with two hands, be across the pylon, have 2 feet down, and then you still have to carry the ball out of bounds, 5 yards sliding. When a running back can just do boom. Explain it.
I mean, that's something they've got to get figured out. It's not going to be this season, but the offseason, just because it just seems like there's so many different interpretations of the rule. I mean, think back to last year in that LSU game, the South Carolina LSU game. That call gets overturned where the LSU receiver, and it was a huge play that pretty much gave LSU the win, where the LSU wide receiver in that little post route catches the ball and takes about 3 steps in bounds. But then when he goes out of bounds, he loses it. And it was originally called incomplete, but then they flipped it to complete. And I just think that's basically kind of the same thing you saw with Nick Harbor yesterday. Like, he got at least 2 feet in, and then it's just there's so many different interpretations of the rule. And I don't think anybody really knows what a catch is anymore, to be honest.
Yeah, I certainly don't. A team that didn't have to worry about catching the ball very much was Texas against Ohio State. Arch Manning, man. I was with a bunch of guys, and let me just tell you, the hate was coming on strong for a kid they've never met. And look, some of that's the national media. I get it. National media props somebody up. You're sick of hearing about it. But I actually felt bad for Arch Manning there because I've watched him play last year and seen that he can make throws, but it was not his day. Probably not ready for the big game, defending national champions, but if Gamecock fans thought that Lenore Sellers looked terrible against Old Dominion last year, Arch Manning said, "Hold my beer," because it was an ugly game.
Yeah, he made a few decent throws in that game, but it was really kind of up and down. And that's to give him a little bit of credit too. Ohio State's defense is really good. I mean, Caleb Downs in the secondary, the rest of those guys, they've got a really good defense. And I think Texas has San Jose State this weekend or somebody along those lines. So they'll have a few games to kind of build his confidence back up. But that's going to be another interesting thing to watch when they kind of get into the SEC schedule. What he kind of looks like there.
I agree with you. So looking at the AP Top 25 poll, Alex, we all know the Gamecocks came in ranked 13th in the AP, also 13th in the coaches. But for this exercise, Alex, let's just focus on the AP here. So number 1, Texas lost to number 3. Number 4, Clemson lost to number 9, LSU. Number 6, Notre Dame lost to number 10, Miami. Number 8, Alabama lost to unranked Florida State. My first question for you, Alex, is how far does Alabama drop?
That's the main question when it comes to South Carolina. I would think they're dropping past South Carolina, but it's also with it being Alabama, I could see them falling to a 12th or something like that.
They'll be, in my opinion, Alex, they'll definitely be behind at least 15 no-loss teams.
Yeah,
at least 15. You have to this early.
Yeah, you're probably right. Where would you guess? I'm saying 16.
I'm saying I think Alabama drops to 18th. I think they'll drop 10 spots, and I think Florida State comes up to like 21.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. And then just from a South Carolina perspective, obviously Miami is going to move up. Like, I doubt Notre Dame is going to fall that far. Maybe they drop outside the top 10, but I'd be surprised if they do. I don't think they are, to be honest. Just projecting where South Carolina is going to be, I don't think they get into the top 10. I just don't think that I can see them moving up one spot, to be honest. I think they can just.
I think that based on everything that the preseason said, I think Ohio State should jump Penn State for number one in the country. I really do.
I do too, yeah.
So that's what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to say Ohio State number one, Penn State number two. They're not going to drop them. I think then it's going to be Georgia 4.
Georgia.
We'll go Georgia 4. I think Texas will go to 5, but they might drop further because of how bad Arch Manning looked. That's the question. How far does Texas drop outside of the top 15?
Oh, I don't think so. No. I don't think they're dropping out of the top 10, to be honest.
Yeah, how far does Clemson drop?
10th, maybe. I can see them in there. I can see them going a little bit further. I wouldn't be surprised to see them show up at 10 tomorrow.
Well, the question becomes, are the Tennessees, because they're Tennessee, going to get bumped up higher? Are the Ole Misses going to get bumped up higher? Indiana after last year, A&M, Oklahoma, Florida, Michigan. Then you have Arizona State, Illinois, South Carolina, SMU, not really household names like some of those others might be right now based on last year's playoffs and tradition. So I don't think South Carolina will be no worse than 11th. I feel pretty confident in.
Okay.
Because I think you are going to see Clemson fall out of the top 12, and I think that you will see Alabama fall out of the top 15. So that gets them up to 11, and then it just becomes how big of a tumble does Texas take to get in the top 10. But I'll put it this way: if Miami had lost to Notre Dame, I don't think there's any doubt South Carolina would be in the top 10.
Yeah, for sure. Like I kind of feel like it kind of just feels like it'd be a thing where everybody just moves up a spot from that Arizona State, Illinois, South Carolina range. And again, like you said, it kind of depends on the Alabama drop and the Clemson drop. How far do they go? And if Texas goes farther than we think, but I just don't think they're going to drop that far in that range. So I'll predict. I know you're going 11, so I'll go different. I'll go 12 tomorrow is where they're going to be. I'll say they go up a spot, but wouldn't be surprised if they're at 11, to be honest.
Does South Carolina jump anybody in front of them? That one. So, like, can they jump Illinois or Arizona State?
There's a definite argument for it just because South Carolina did play Virginia Tech, and Illinois played like a Western Illinois and something like. I think Arizona State played Northern Arizona. I think so. If you're going to play that game, you could play the game of what South Carolina did it against a Power 5, Power 4, 5, whatever we're calling it now, team. So maybe that's gets them where they can jump those two, but I don't know. I'm going to predict that doesn't happen. Yeah,
so I'll go 11. Alex goes 12. Alex, I think we hit everything, man.
Yeah, that was a full show. That's from overall thoughts on the game. Just week one, like I think that's the game you just take the win and get back to Columbia if you're South Carolina, just because that's a game that Virginia Tech. There's you saw that line was 6.5, I think, at kickoff at that point. Like there are a lot of people who are thinking Virginia Tech could possibly either keep it closer than what the final score ended up being, or even win that game. But I think South Carolina, there's a lot to build on. There's obviously it's week one. There's things to improve on there in all three phases really. But there are a lot of good things to build on too that we all talked about, or that we both talked about here.
Yeah, and I think I downplayed this to a certain extent that maybe I shouldn't have. It was definitely an emotional game for Shane. I think that after the first 5 minutes, the game soaks in. You're coaching your team, but let's not discount that. It probably was something of a day when your dad's giving the blessing and wearing your shirt and your alma mater's pin. I bet Shane never wants to go through that again unless it's a bowl game.
Yeah, and the whole motto kind of thing is, and the mantra around all these teams are you make that biggest jump from week one to week two. So we'll see how you can kind of quantify that with the matchup this weekend. But something to watch is going to be that Vandy Virginia Tech game this upcoming or on Saturday, just from a South Carolina perspective, just because you can see you're going to have a lot of good film to kind of break down. But then also, I know we're going to talk about Virginia Tech, but that's a huge game for Virginia Tech and Brent Pry. So that's going to be a really interesting game to watch. I wish it was a noon game just because that South Carolina is going to be at the same time as the South Carolina game, but really going to be interesting to watch just because you got Vanderbilt coming into town next weekend.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think that next weekend's Rooster Rant, hopefully, unless there's some things that need to be discussed, like God forbid a loss to South Carolina State or injuries, anything like that. It'll probably be a lot of what do we learn after 2 weeks next Sunday night, which will be really good, and looking forward to it. Well, Alex, before we get out of here, we just want to thank everybody for giving us your time. When you spend your time with us, it's the most valuable thing you have. We never take it for granted. So thank you. Alex and I will be back Wednesday at 8 p.m. for the late night Gamecocks show. Be talking a good bit about South Carolina State, but also, odds and ends we might be hearing behind the scenes, what we've learned from Virginia Tech to Wednesday. And Alex and I will be back with our best bets. I haven't figured out who won yet between us this past weekend, but we'll have our best bet segment. I have a special surprise too that I'm looking forward to that I think will be ready Wednesday night. So thank y'all so much. We hope you have a great evening, and we will see you Wednesday at 8.